St. Alphonsus said that the devil does not drag sinners to hell with their eyes open. Rather, he blinds them through the malice of their own sins. I've been thinking a lot lately about how I would say, hyper-modern conceptions of freedom, a lot of what is passed off, especially on the internet, as the sort of, I would say, kitschification, but a particular internet kitschification of sin that has within it a mixture of like millennial sentimentality and a sort of, let's call it for what it is, a sort of girl boss brashness that is largely performative. It's such a nice evening out here. The weather is starting to change. But I've been thinking a lot lately about how a lot of what we're seeing as these sort of hyper normalized expressions of quote unquote behavioral freedoms, how they serve as odd forms of humiliation rituals. They are humiliations for people of an older mindset, where I guess the meme term would be against time. I saw this one post. People were ratioing this. I struggled to call this person a woman or even a person. But it was this, I don't want to fed post, but this mother, quote unquote, was reading this book to her little boy. And it's a children's book, literally a children's book, about teaching children about action. This is how far we've fallen. And the fact that they're blind to how disgusting that is to a lot of people, if not most people. And I responded with something about you couldn't get a more glaring example of the sort of inner depravity that is required. It takes a sort of debasement, if you will, to find those type of things perfectly normal. And I remember thinking about it. I remember thinking of when I was that age. I think I was watching or was overhearing my parents watch some detective show. I think it may have been Da Vinci's Inquest. For those who don't know, it's a Canadian show. And the woman, the main character, she said, like, she was talking about how she couldn't have kids because she had an abortion. And I remember asking, like, what is that? Right? And of course, my parents were like, oh, don't worry about it. She was just sick, blah, blah, blah. So, like, knowing that it totally wasn't appropriate to explain these things to a child, right? But these people have no boundaries, and it makes perfect sense why they have no boundaries. And this came after, I was thinking about this because the tweet came about the same time as it was me and that Nate Hosh guy, I forget his last name, and Alex Kashuta on BTR, the groomer stream. And I was thinking about how it makes perfect sense to them because there is no boundaries, because boundaries don't exist anymore, because boundaries are a violation of their sacred, secular, humanist, liberal project. And that's what it is. It's a purely materialist understanding of the subject. It is an understanding of you are just matter. You are just, there's no source of like sacredness or significance to any action. But children complicate this because by definition, their innocence is maintained, and they shouldn't be brought into the world of adults for whatever that means, right? You know, like I know it's like a cliche, it's like a Dr. Phil throwaway, but it's like, you never bring issues of adults into the world of children. Well, it's true, though. It's true because you're overloading them. You are corrupting something that we used to hold as sacred. But that's a problem for their understanding of quote-unquote liberation and autonomy, because you can't have any group of subjects that are omitted from that project, because it would call into question the whole. It would call into question the nature of such a project of total rootless autonomy, total behavioral quote-unquote freedom. And that just doesn't cut it for them, right? So therefore, they are progressively normalizing the bringing up of adult issues into the world of children. And the way they sell it is this this fake wholesomeness that millennials love, right? This like Reddit heckin' wholesome chungus, twee core, like younger Gen Xers and millennials in particular love this. This sort of like, oh, isn't it cute when a child says naughty things? Isn't it cute when a child does adult things? That sort of nonsense that we were brought up with. Therefore, the sort of, and at the same time you have this thing where the pure heart of the child, right, is the ultimate source of wisdom, as Picasso would say, as he bedded women of a questionable age. So you have these things coming together to where children now become weapons of the regime. They become ideological and discursive tools of the regime. They become the child foot soldiers. They become the cultural child foot soldiers of the regime. And this is for a variety of reasons. Because when they make it out of the womb, they will definitely be weaponized and they will be instrumentalized. And I'm just thinking of the immense evil of this. But of course, they don't think of it this way because they think that within modern liberal society, you live, you die, there's nothing when you die. You can only maximize pleasure. You can only be offered palliatives for the absolute angst and existential dread and ennui and anime, as Durkheim said, a place of listlessness, a place without belonging. I believe that was the definition. I could be wrong. But they view this sort of like ultra secular humanist project where you can experience any pleasure you want at any age you want. You can experience anything. There is no such thing as separation between peoples because any form of hierarchy or separation is evil. And you basically need a top-down managerial technocracy to fulfill various ends because you need to account for the deviant behavior that leads to absolute social catastrophe. And add to this, the state enforced ideology of multiculturalism. You have a toxic brew of people that need to be led at all costs. And they sort of view it as like, I remember back in the 2000s, there was like this huge fetish for like the Scandinavian model. And there was documentaries where I remember this one guy who was a scientist, of course, right? Of course. He doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe in an afterlife. But he had some kind of like Huntington's or something. And it was this documentary where he paid Dignitas in, is it Denmark? Or is it in Sweden? I think they have branches all over where he like to get assisted, checking out, if you know what I mean. And he paid like $200,000 to like fly there and do this. And you could see like the immense disgusting privilege of that. And you can see like how it is a clinicization of the human in times when historically there were the most sacred of rituals around someone's death. So I remember watching this when I was like, I want to say 17, 18 years old. and it floored me. I couldn't understand it. Well, I could understand it, but like not to the same depth or anything. I may have been 16 years old, and it struck a chord in me in how there is this, on the one end, there's a speak of the therapeutic state, which is like empathy and compassion, and we're going to take care of you. But then at the other end is this immense amount of brutal dehumanization through medicalization and through the sort of technocratic controlling of bare life itself and who can live and die. And especially women now become the dispenser of life and death, right? Especially in the beginning. So you have a lot of these factors, but behind it, and this is where, people like BAP, they're good at this. I was listening to his episode 100 podcast special, Caribbean Rhythms, and he was talking about religion and how the sort of sacred conception of the state as a people in the ancient regime was much different. Nowadays, people view the state as something more abstract, something more managerial. So they can't understand this, right? They can't understand that these things were all integrated. But nowadays, you have this sort of return of the, what does he call it? Like the longhouse gynocracy, right? Which is a very powerful idea. Because a lot of this is a mix of sentimentality and the other end, like a very brutal clinicization of the human. And a lot of this is because there is no boundaries anymore. There is no ritual that dictates that there is a separation between ages and peoples and so forth. And that you have a lot of rulership by, let's face it, without going into detail, people who have no business ruling. It's sort of what does BAP say? The dysgenic filth. And so, and this is in toto, the direct result of developments within politics, within civilization, to destroy what we once knew as sacred. And all of this culminates into one, and finally we have the secular managerial state that takes over the place of ritual in public life and preaches to you that there is no thing that is worth pursuing. There is no such thing as fulfillment other than the meeting of material conditions, life viewed through the stomach, life viewed through the erogenous zones of pleasure, but also that life is something that can be destroyed, not in a glorious fashion, but rather destroyed clinically and within the sort of whims of comfort of certain demographics. That life can be suspended and cheapened, and even children can engage in such activities, because to say that they are different and they're exempt of the project of liberation, that just can't be. So I've just been thinking about all of this. I've been thinking about how these things sort of really doom us, because there is no easy way to argue out of this. Because most people will take these sort of the line that, well, this is the best society ever because my material conditions are met, and because I don't want to be burdened with, the responsibilities of because this is what it is. It's really worshiping adolescence. That's what the boomers have infected us Gen Xers and millennials, us millennials with. It's really like the worship of adolescence, to be an adolescent forever, where you are just adult enough to do the quote-unquote cool stuff, but you are never adult enough to be responsible for the future of civilization. That's why it terrifies me when I saw that image, because it's like, it's such a perversion, but they don't have a concept of perversion anymore. So you can say, you can go up to these people, but it's almost like they, without getting into theological quandaries here, it's almost as if they don't have a real functioning soul, in a sense. it's almost like they are totally into a state of privation, that they are given over to a reprobate mind, because they really don't have a conception of shame or depravity or genuine, like, sacredness in life. Nothing is sacred to them. They can't understand. They literally cannot understand why something like that is disgusting to people. So I'm just ranting right now, but I think that the sort of secular, humanist, liberal project ultimately leads to a form of nihilism at the end of the day. That is my message. So anyways, like, share, subscribe, click the bell, donate if you must. A lot of stuff coming your way, but there is no like happy ending to this message. I just wanted to rant because there are things that you see, especially online, especially when people praise certain things, like Yas Queen online, like TikTok discourse, and they're like, there's TikTok videos with like hundreds of thousands of views about like the same, like, it all started with that quote unquote shout your campaign. I covered that actually in my series, my very long article I did in 2019 about that art gallery is normal. It's that same sort of like girl bossism, yes queen, TikTok lingo that came from Tumblr. It came from other places as well, but I mean, that is like that is I think, unfortunately, a more effective brainworm than any sort of old school feminist agitprop, right? Because like at least the old school second wavers, at least they recognize some form of the enemy, like against, they went against pornography and things like that. But when it came to this specific issue of ending human life, that is unfortunately, especially among Zoomer young women, it's just it's a very tough brainworm to fight, because it has behind it the assumptions that have driven modern Western liberal civilization. If you can even call it civilization, more like anti-civilization, but it has driven like modern liberal society for, generations now. And there's no easy way around it. There has to be something that can transform the way that we look at life itself, which is very difficult in the age that we live in. So anyways, as always, God bless. Goodbye. It's almost dark. Too sweet.